The door is unmarked, set into a brick wall on First Avenue in Seattle's Pioneer Square. It looks like a service entrance, the kind you pass 1,000 times without noticing. But behind it, a wooden staircase drops into darkness, and at the bottom, the modern city vanishes. You are standing on a sidewalk, not a metaphorical one, an actual paved walkway, complete with curbs, storefronts, and window frames, sitting a full story beneath the traffic overhead. The air is cool and mineral. Overhead, purple glass squares glow faintly where daylight leaks down through the pavement above. This is the Seattle Underground, roughly 6 blocks of enclosed passages preserved beneath the streets of the oldest downtown in the city. Here, the ground floor of the 1890s has become the basement of today. Cast iron columns still hold up lintels that once framed shop windows. Faded lettering advertises businesses that closed more than a century ago. Brick archways lead into rooms half filled with rubble, old plumbing, and the occasional abandoned toilet stranded on a raised platform. Tour guides move groups through with flashlights, and the questions come quickly. Why is there a city down here? Who left it? What happened to the people who walked these boards when they were the top level, not the bottom? The instinct is to imagine catastrophe, a place swallowed, a settlement drowned in earth, a civilization sealed away and forgotten. That instinct is wrong, but it is not baseless. Something did happen here, something violent and deliberate, and it left this layer behind like a pressed flower between the pages of the city. To understand it, you cannot start with the darkness. You have to start above ground, in the sunlight of the 1880s, when this street was the only street, when these sidewalks were new, and when Seattle was a raw boomtown of green lumber balanced on the edge of Elliott Bay. Because the buried city is not a mystery of who vanished. It is a mystery of what a young town chose to do when everything it had built came apart at once. To see why, we go back to the city of wood. In 1880, Seattle was a settlement of roughly 3,500 people, and nearly everything they had was made of timber. The forest came right down to the waterline, and the mills turned Douglas fir into planks faster than the town could nail them together. Streets, sidewalks, storefronts, warehouses, wharves, all wood. It was cheap, abundant, and dangerously combustible, and it was rising on some of the worst ground imaginable. The commercial district sat on the tidal flats near Elliott Bay, a low margin of land that was mud as much as it was earth. At high tide, Puget Sound pushed water back up into the streets. The natural grade barely cleared sea level, and drainage simply did not work. Toilets in the lower blocks were notorious. When the tide came in, the newly installed water closets could reverse, and residents learned to consult tide tables before flushing. Sewage pooled where it should have flowed away. The wooden sidewalks were built up on posts to keep pedestrians above the muck, creating an uneven landscape of ramps and steps between blocks. Horses occasionally broke through rotting planks. Beneath the boards, water and refuse collected in stagnant channels. It was a boom town in a hurry, and the hurry showed. Buildings went up without coordinated street grades, so one block might sit higher than its neighbor. Water mains were undersized. The fire protection was a patchwork of volunteer companies and wooden water pipes, hollowed logs in some cases, that could not deliver pressure when it mattered. Everyone could see the risk. Newspapers warned of it. Insurance rates reflected it. A city built entirely of dry lumber, packed tightly along muddy streets, with an unreliable water supply, was a fire waiting for a spark. The population kept growing anyway. By 1889, Seattle held tens of thousands and was competing with Tacoma and Portland to become the great port of the Northwest. The ambition was real, and so was the vulnerability underneath it. All of it, the mud, the drainage, the wooden pipes, the crowded blocks, was about to be tested on a single dry afternoon in June when a small flame in a basement workshop refused to stay put. It began just after 2:30 in the afternoon on June 6, 1889, in a cabinet shop in the basement of the Pontius Building at the corner of Front Street and Madison. An assistant named John Back was heating glue over a gasoline fire. The glue boiled over, ignited, and spread across a floor scattered with wood shavings and turpentine. Someone threw water on it, exactly the wrong thing for a chemical fire, and the flames spread faster, climbing the wood frame walls of the shop. Within minutes, the building was lost. The fire found precisely the conditions Seattle had built for it: dry lumber, tight blocks, and a summer afternoon with no rain. It jumped from structure to structure along Front Street. The volunteer fire department connected hoses and opened hydrants, and the water pressure collapsed. Too many lines were drawing at once from a system that had never been strong enough. Hoses went limp. Firefighters could only watch as building after building caught. The flames moved south and east through the commercial core. Wholesale houses, banks, hotels, and the wharves along the waterfront all burned. Burning pilings dropped into the bay. The fire consumed the opera house, the railroad terminals, and nearly every business that mattered to the city's economy. By the time it burned itself out that night, roughly 25 city blocks, about 120 acres of the downtown business district, were gone. The astonishing detail is that no one is recorded as having died in the flames. Property loss ran to millions of dollars, an enormous sum for a city of that size, but the human toll was almost nothing. Seattle woke on June 7th to a smoking field of brick foundations and collapsed walls where its heart had been. And here the story turns from disaster to decision. A ruined city can rebuild exactly what it had, as fast as possible. Or it can pause, look hard at the mud and the failed pipes and the flooding tides, and ask whether the old ground was ever the right place to build. Seattle's leaders, standing in the ash, chose the harder path. They decided not just to rebuild, but to raise the very streets beneath their feet. The fire had cleared the slate, and Seattle's engineers saw a chance they might never get again. The core problem had never been only fire. It was elevation. The downtown sat too low, drowned by tides and choked by drainage that ran uphill. So the city passed ordinances requiring new buildings to be constructed of brick and stone, and it committed to something far more ambitious: regrading the streets themselves, lifting the roadways above the reach of the water. The plan was to raise the street level, in places by as much as 12 feet, though the amount varied block by block. Some stretches rose only a few feet, others closer to 18. To do it, crews built tall retaining walls of brick and concrete along both sides of each street, creating hollow troughs where the road had been. Then they filled those troughs with earth, rubble from the fire, and material sluiced down from Seattle's hills. On top of the fill, they laid the new, elevated roadway. The trouble was timing. The city could not wait for the streets before rebuilding, and merchants would not wait either. So new buildings went up along the old, low grade, even as the plan called for the streets to rise around them. The result was surreal. A pedestrian could walk along a raised street 12 feet in the air, look down over the retaining wall, and see the original sidewalk and the ground floor entrances of brick buildings sitting far below, in a canyon between the new road and the building fronts. For a time, ladders connected the two levels. People climbed up and down to cross streets. Accidents happened. Falls from the upper grade into the lower one were a genuine hazard, and at least a few proved fatal. What had been the front door of a shop was now a basement doorway staring at a wall of fill. The old first floors were becoming cellars while the city looked on. The engineering logic was sound, and the flooding did improve. But the raised streets created a strange side effect nobody set out to build: a hidden layer of sidewalks and storefronts, walled off in the shadow of the new pavement. And that layer needed to be covered. The gap could not stay open. Between the tall retaining walls that held up the new streets and the old fronts of the brick buildings ran a continuous trench, the original sidewalk, now sunk in a canyon of masonry. Leaving it exposed was dangerous and impractical, so the city and the property owners did the obvious thing. They roofed it over. Beams were laid from the retaining walls to the building facades, spanning the gap, and a new sidewalk was built on top at the higher street level. Underneath, the old walkway survived intact. Curbs, paving, shop entrances and all, now enclosed in a corridor of permanent shadow. These covered corridors are the areaways, the hollow sidewalks that form the bones of the Seattle Underground. Walk them today, and you can trace the original grade of the 1890th Street, running past doorways that once opened to daylight. But the engineers faced a problem. Covered passages are dark, and merchants still had windows and lower entrances facing into them, so they let the light down through the ceiling. Set into the new upper sidewalks were small squares of glass, prism glass, cast to bend and scatter daylight downward into the space below. From above, they looked like decorative pavers. From beneath, they glowed. Thousands of these glass prisms were installed across the district, turning solid sidewalk into a translucent skylight. Over the decades, the glass took on a violet tint, a chemical reaction to manganese in the material reacting to years of sunlight. You can still see those purple squares overhead in the underground, faint constellations marking the feet of pedestrians walking the street above. For a while, this was simply how the city worked. The upper level carried through traffic, while the lower level kept functioning. Shops, entrances, and foot passages, all operating below the raised roads, lit by prism glass and connected by stairways. Seattle was a city living on two floors at once, half in the new sunlight and half in the borrowed light filtering through the pavement. It could not last. The double life of the lower level was awkward, unhealthy, and increasingly unwanted, and one by one the reasons to abandon it began to pile up until the underground was sealed away for good. For nearly a decade after the regrade began, Seattle lived on two floors at once. The streets had risen, but the buildings had not, so merchants adapted. A hardware dealer might sell nails at the original ground floor, then climb a wooden ladder to serve customers who arrived along the new elevated sidewalk 12 feet above. Photographs from the 1890s show pedestrians pausing at the lip of these trenches, staring down at shop windows sunk below their boots. Some intersections required ladders so steep that newspapers reported at least 17 deaths from falls into the exposed areaways during the transition years. City engineers pressed forward regardless, filling and paving until the upper level became the only level that mattered. One by one, storefronts converted their old first floors into basements. Stockrooms replaced showrooms. Skylights of amethyst glass, tinted purple by manganese reacting to sunlight, still glowed faintly overhead, but the foot traffic had migrated upward for good. Then came fear. In 1907, bubonic plague scares along the Pacific coast made the dark, rat-friendly passages a public health liability. City officials condemned the underground for habitation, citing sanitation, flooding, and the ever-present rats. Doors were bricked shut, windows were sealed with mortar. What had been sidewalks and lobbies became forgotten cavities beneath the pavement. A few uses persisted in the shadows: storage cellars, speakeasies during Prohibition, opium dens, and gambling rooms that thrived precisely because no respectable citizen looked below the street. But for most of Seattle, the lower levels simply ceased to exist. By the 1920s, the transition was complete. The city walked confidently along Yesler Way and First Avenue, without a thought for the storefronts entombed underfoot. Guidebooks stopped mentioning the ladders. Maps drew only the surface. The underground passed out of memory into rumor, a place spoken of by old-timers and dismissed by everyone else. Yet Seattle was never unique in this. The same collision of disaster, engineering, and ambition had played out in other American downtowns, each bearing its own past for reasons remarkably similar. To understand what Seattle really did, we must leave Pioneer Square and travel south, following the pattern down the coast and across the country. Seattle's buried city was never an accident of one town. Travel south to Portland, Oregon, and the story rhymes. Beneath the Old Town District run the so-called Shanghai Tunnels, a network of basements and passageways connecting buildings to the Willamette waterfront. Much of it began, like Seattle, as functional cellar space and connective corridors serving warehouses and hotels, later wrapped in lurid legends of kidnapped sailors. The documented core is plainer, a working underground built for commerce and delivery in a river city prone to flooding. Continue to Sacramento, California, and the pattern sharpens into pure engineering. After catastrophic floods in 1861 and 1862 drowned the young capital underwater for months, the city made a radical decision. Between the 1860s and 1870s, crews raised the streets of Old Sacramento by as much as 9 to 14 feet, hauling in earthen fill and building retaining walls exactly as Seattle would decades later. Ground floors became basements. Sidewalks became tunnels. Merchants jacked entire brick buildings upward on screw jacks to meet the new grade. The buried level survives today, toured beneath the historic district, proof that Seattle's solution was a shared American reflex to water. Now across the continent, to Atlanta, Georgia. Here the buried layer was born not of fire or flood, but of railroads. In the 1920s, a lattice of viaducts was constructed over the tangle of tracks at the city's founding point, lifting automobile traffic above the rail lines. The original storefronts at 0 Mile Post were abandoned to shadow, and by the 1960s that forgotten street level had been reborn as underground Atlanta, a warren of Victorian facades preserved beneath the new roads. Different cause, identical result. A whole block of the past sealed one story down. Fire in Seattle, flood in Sacramento, railroads in Atlanta. 3 cities, 3 catastrophes, 1 logic. When the surface fails, raise the surface. The old ground does not vanish. It simply falls out of use. But if this was ordinary engineering, how did Seattle's underground become a magnet for ghost tours and legend? The answer lies with one determined man and the year 1965. By the mid-20th century, Seattle's underground was slated to disappear a second time. Pioneer Square had decayed into a skid road of flophouses and vacant buildings, and city planners in the early 1960s eyed the district for demolition. The sealed passages beneath were considered worthless, dangerous, forgotten, filled with debris. Then came Bill Spadell. A newspaperman and local historian, Spadell had spent years collecting the documented record of the 1889 fire and the regrade that followed. In 1954, he had written about the buried level, and by 1965 he organized the first public tours, leading curious visitors down through basements into the amethyst-lit corridors below the sidewalks. The response was immediate. Thousands paid to walk the old ground floors, and the revenue and attention helped launch a preservation movement. In 1970, Pioneer Square became one of the nation's first designated historic districts, saved in large part because people wanted to see what lay beneath it. But rediscovery brought embellishment. As the tours grew, so did the stories. Guides spoke of murders, brothels, and restless ghosts. Tales of the plague years hardened into legends of bodies hidden in the walls. The purple skylights became portals. The sealed doors became crime scenes. Paranormal investigators arrived with cameras and instruments, and the underground acquired a reputation as one of America's most haunted places. Separating the documented from the invented is not difficult, only necessary. The fire of June 6, 1889, is real, recorded in insurance ledgers and newspaper columns. The regrade, the retaining walls, the 12-foot lift, the 1907 condemnation, all sit in the city's engineering archives. The ghosts do not. The gambling dens and speakeasies existed. The phantom footsteps are performance. What Spadell truly resurrected was not a haunted city, but a historical one. A physical record of decisions made under pressure, preserved by neglect, and rescued by curiosity. So we descend one final time, past the legends, to read the passages for what they actually contain. Not a lost civilization, not a graveyard of secrets. An archive in brick and glass, waiting to tell the plainest and most remarkable story of all. Return to the corridors beneath Pioneer Square, and look with an engineer's eye rather than a ghost hunter's. Every feature is a decision, dated and deliberate. The retaining walls that flank the old sidewalks are not tomb walls. They are the load-bearing edges of streets raised between 1889 and the early 1900s to defeat flooding and fix a broken drainage system. The amethyst prisms overhead are not eyes of the dead. They are Luxfer-style glass sidewalk lights, manufactured to carry daylight into commercial space below. Their purple hue, the slow chemistry of manganese, and decades of sun. Read the brickwork and you can date the transition. The lower courses belong to buildings that survived or replaced the fire, their ground floors finished for customers who once walked at that level. The sealed windows and mortared doorways mark 1907, when plague fears and sanitation codes closed the passages to the public. The iron columns, the ladder scars, the cast thresholds worn by feet, each is an entry in a ledger of urban ambition. There is no mystery to solve here, only a process to understand. A wooden city burned, a muddy city flooded, and rather than accept those limits, Seattle lifted its streets above them, leaving the old surface intact, one floor down. What survives is not a secret, but a section drawing you can walk through, a crosscut of the moment a 19th century boomtown chose to become something taller and more permanent. The same is true beneath Sacramento, beneath Portland, beneath Atlanta. Across the country, cities faced disaster and answered by rising, literally raising the ground beneath their feet and building forward. The buried layers they left behind are not lost worlds. They are the visible seam between what a city was and what it decided to become. So when you descend the stairs off First Avenue and stand in the dim, glowing passage where pedestrians once shopped in open daylight, understand exactly what you are seeing. Not a catastrophe entombed, not a ghost story, a record of ambition made solid. They didn't bury a city, they outgrew one.